for Chapter 7 of our textbook, Sexual Victimization. So first we're going to talk about the definition of sexual victimization. It encompasses victimizations of people that involve sexual behavior. So it's a wide range of behaviors from videotaping all the way to forced penetration. So physical injury and psychological trauma are common effects of sexual victimization. Okay, so first we're going to talk about rape. So the definition of rape has changed over the years. So the original definition was called carnal knowledge. So this was forced and non-consensual vaginal penetration of a woman who was not married to the perpetrator. This is a very, very narrow definition. So it's only vaginal penetration and only a woman, so men or transgender individuals could not be victims. And if the perpetrator was married to the victim, it was not considered a rape. So thankfully, our understanding of rape has come a long way since then, and we now have a completely different definition. So anyone can be a victim. It's not dependent on their sex or their gender. And most states have withdrawn the exclusion of husbands as perpetrators. So now a husband can, in fact, rape his wife. Okay, so some of the common indicators of rape. Non-consensual contact between genital, anal, or oral areas of a victim and genital hand or finger of the perpetrator. A perpetrator could also use an object to penetrate the victim. So there's 3 elements of rape. First, that there has to be sexual contact. Second, a threat or a force used. And third, non-consensual. So this also includes victims that are not able to give consent. So these would be victims that are under the age of consent, which in most states is either 17 or 18. Some are still 16. Okay, so we're going to talk about a little bit about the different types of rape. So first is forcible rape. So this is when someone uses force or threatens to use force to penetrate a victim against his or her will. So this is the actor Danny Masterson. He was charged with forcible rape of several different women going over the span of, I think, 15 years. He's also charged with a number of other sex crimes. He's currently awaiting trial, and it's supposed to start really soon here in August 2022. So the next type of rape is a drug or alcohol facilitated rape. So this means that the victim is deliberately drugged or given, alcohol by the perpetrator in order for the perpetrator to commit the act of rape. So this would include things like date rape. This is Samantha Gailey. In 1977, she was 13 years old and was drugged and raped by the director, Roman Polanski. So Polanski fled the U.S. to France and so that he would not be sentenced. And the charges against him are still pending, and he has not been charged because he was able to flee the country. So incapacitated rape. This occurs when a victim is not necessarily given drugs or alcohol by the offender, but she or he becomes intoxicated after taking drugs or alcohol themselves. So an example of this is Brock Turner raped Chanel Miller after a college party. Miller was unconscious and did not remember the rape at all. So she was helped by 2 men riding their bikes past and saw that Miller was incapacitated. She could not defend herself, and they're able to, pull Brock away and hold him until the police arrived. So the next type of rape is statutory rape. So this is when the victim is younger than the age of consent, which here in Texas is 17. So this type of rape does not necessarily mean that the victim was forced. It's just solely because of their age. So maybe the victim was willing, but because they have not reached the age of consent, it is still considered rape. So this is Amy Fisher when she was 16 years old. She was her partner or boyfriend, Joey Botafuku, who was, I think, in his 30s, was charged with statutory rape for having a sexual relationship with a 16-year-old girl. This case is well known because Amy Fisher then shot Joey's wife in the face, and she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Okay, so now some types of sexual victimization that does not involve rape. So the first is sexual coercion. So this involves penetration, whether this be penis, mouth, tongue, or object, but the perpetrator does not use physical force, but they use emotional or psychological tactics to victimize the victim instead. So this is when someone might pressure someone for sex, promising them a reward. They might, it's common. It was common in Hollywood, still probably is common in Hollywood, to get acting roles as sort of a reward from directors. And one sort of famous case that has come out recently, the documentary Secrets of Playboy, Hugh Hefner was found to have, and other men involved in the magazine, were found to have sexually coerced women to have sex with him in exchange for being a Playmate of the Year, which opened, a lot of doors for them with their careers. So unwanted sexual contact, this does not involve penetration, but it's a person is touched in their erogenous zone, but it doesn't involve penetration. Again, this could be touching or groping. Andrew Cuomo, he was a former mayor of New York State governor, and he was accused by multiple women of unwanted groping, kissing, and fondling. So the prosecutors did not move forward with these charges. These things are very, very difficult to prove in court. So while he was accused of these things, he was never convicted or charged with them. Okay, so non-contact sexual abuse. This usually involves visual abuse, sending pornographic images to the victim, or verbal abuse. It sounds intentionally abusive and in a sexual manner. So a common sort of non-contact sexual abuse are these sort of student-teacher sex crimes where the teacher is sending pornographic material, maybe nudes of herself, to her students. This has been happening quite a bit lately. And this is Brycelyn Hoggy. And she was 22 years old, teacher, and she was a volleyball coach at a high school. She sent nudes to herself to a 17-year-old student. And she faces up to 20 years in prison. The trial has not happened yet, so she's currently awaiting trial. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how sexual victimization is measured. So while we don't use the UCR anymore, we use NIBRS. We want to talk a little bit about the definition. The former definition was very, very restrictive. It only includes forcible rape and only of women. As of 2013, they changed that definition, and it includes non-forcible rape as well. So it's very hard to exactly measure how much sexual victimization, how much rape is happening when there's so many different definitions. So in the 2018 UCR, about 44.4 per 100K. And again, it's really hard to compare with previous years because of changing definitions. We see here around 2013, it seems to have increased, but it just might be that the definition has changed and more behaviors are now considered to be rapes. And it could also be that people are reporting it more. Okay, so the NCVS, the Crime Victimization Survey in 2018, there was almost 750,000 rapes and sexual assaults. And there's a much, much higher rate than the UCR because this also includes rapes and sexual assaults that were not reported. So about 2.7 per 1,000. Again, recently we haven't been able to really have a good handle on exactly how much crime is taking place, so we're not too sure how that has changed. But it is, much higher than the UCR or NIBRS because the dark figure of crime is accounted for. Also, the NCVS, the measurement fits a greater variety of sexual assaults as well, so threatened rape and different types of sexual assaults. Okay, so now some risk factors and characteristics. So this is the one crime type that females are victimized more than males. And females are most at risk in late teens and early 20s. So really the college years are the heightened, risk period for being sexually assaulted. Males are most at risk under the age of 12. And some of the demographic characteristics with heightened risk, these are similar to those for other types of crime. So lower socioeconomic status, being unemployed. We really don't know whether people in urban or rural areas have higher victimization rates, but one interesting thing to note is that for most other types of crime, being enrolled in college is a protective factor, so you'd be less likely to be victimized. However, for college-aged females, being enrolled in college, those women are more likely to be raped or sexually assaulted than those not enrolled in college. So being enrolled in college is a risk factor. So offenders can be anyone, but most commonly it's a white male between the ages of 25 and 34, and it's perpetrated by somebody known to the victim. So stranger rapes and stranger sexual assault are pretty rare. Usually it's someone in either a friend relationship or a dating relationship, or even a family member. So females only make up 3% of those arrested for forcible rape. So injury, most victims do not suffer serious injuries, and most rapes don't involve a weapon. So only about 1/3 of rapes actually involve a weapon. Most common weapon used is a firearm. Okay, so reporting sexual assault. So less than half of all rape and sexual assaults come to the attention of law enforcement. I'm going to say it's probably even less than that. And we found that there was a large decrease between 2017 and 2018. Again, we don't really have more recent data to compare that with. Common reasons why victims don't report sexual assault: they're not sure the perpetrator really intended to harm. Like I said, it's not necessarily that it's a stranger sexually assaulting the victim. It's more likely that it's a friend or even a dating partner. So maybe they sort of, thought, oh, maybe he didn't mean it. He didn't really hurt me. Maybe it wasn't a rape. So not knowing whether or not they suffered a sexual assault is a common reason. Also, they might be scared that the perpetrator is going to retaliate. And a big one is the fear of not being believed. And hopefully it's gotten a little bit better with, the Me Too movement, but it's still very underreported. People, don't want to report this to the police and not have them be believed. It's going to probably make their experience even worse. So they might just think, the police aren't going to do anything. They're not going to believe me. Maybe they were under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and don't report for that reason. Okay, so some of the consequences of sexual victimization. While physical consequences are not as common, emotional and psychological effects definitely are. So depression, anger, guilt, helplessness, and irritability are common reactions to being a victim of sexual assault. Also a compulsive behavior, also a common reaction. PTSD and suicidal ideation is linked to sexual victimization as well. As well, people that are a victim of a sexual crime often turn to drugs or alcohol, and they might have difficulties with their future romantic relationships. Okay, so some of the costs, and these are financial costs. So the CDC estimates that the lifetime financial burden for sexual assault victims in the United States is $3.1 trillion, so very, very costly. Mental health counseling has a large percentage of that cost, about $1.2 trillion. And it's about, per victim, about $2,200 for a victim of rape or sexual assault, and about $5,800 for a victim of a child sexual abuse. Missing time from work, again, $1.8 trillion, a very large percentage there. Criminal justice costs, very costly, $234 billion. Property damage is 36 billion, so not an insignificant number there at all either. So the average lifetime cost for each rape victim, including their medical costs, time away from work, criminal justice costs, property damage, is between $87,000 and $122,000. Okay, so mostly we focus our attention of sexual victimization on women, since they're more likely to be victimized, but it's important to remember that males can also be the victim of sexual victimization. So about 3 to 8% of males report being raped in their lifetime, so that's not an insignificant number at all. About 25% report experience some type of unwanted sexual contact, and 43% report experience sexual harassment. They experience the same or similar psychological trauma as females. However, they have less support from family and friends. They might fear being labeled a homosexual if they are heterosexual and are raped. They probably feel like they're not likely to be believed. And they might have an uncontrollable psychological response, so sexual arousal, and may feel shame and confusion because of it. And because of this, men are much less likely to report being a victim of sexual victimization than women are. Okay, so the LGBTQ plus community is at heightened risk for experiencing sexual victimization. So about 47% of transgender people experience a sexual assault in their lifetime. So much, much heightened risk. However, they're also less likely to report because they might feel that they're stigmatized by police, whether you're part of the LGBTQ plus community. You might feel that the police are going to be bigoted against you and not report. So people in this community do have a less likely chance that they're going to report their sexual victimization. Okay, so for legal and criminal justice responses, so there's been, reforms to rape and sexual assault laws in the 1970s, and since then they've been improving all the time. Now everyone can be a victim: men, women, non-gender conforming, transgender. It includes various forms of penetration, not just vaginal penetration, and the removal of the marriage exemption for, most states. So originally, the victims had to produce corroborating evidence to prove assault or rape, and this is really, really hard because this occurs in private places. Usually there's not any additional witnesses. The majority of rapes don't result in physical injury, and many don't involve weapons, and usually the perpetrator is known to the victim. So rape shield laws have been enacted, and this prohibit the use of a victim's previous sexual contact in court. So it used to be that the defense attorneys were able to bring up the sexual history of the victim and use that as sort of, their evidence that it was not an actual rape. But now the jury cannot hear about victims' previous sexual conduct, whether that be with the perpetrator or, with other individuals. Polygraph exams are no longer required for victims. And a few of the sort of recent criminal justice responses: stealthing laws. So these are removal of a condom without the partner's consent. As of right now, only California makes this an offense and only a civil offense. It's not yet a criminal offense, but this could, move forward and become a criminal offense in the future. And in Texas, as of right now, it's now illegal to send an unsolicited dick pic. So this is a Class C misdemeanor and punishable with a $500 fine. So these are kind of the most recent new sort of responses to sexual victimization. Okay, so Megan's Law. So this is 7-year-old Megan Conca. She was raped and murdered by her neighbor in the 1990s, who had previously been convicted of child molestation. So federal law now requires law enforcement authorities to make information public regarding registered sex offenders. So this serves sort of an addition to the Wetterly Act, Wetterling Act, which was a similar case, Jacob Wetterling, a child who was raped and murdered, that requires sex offenders to register. So this is somewhat controversial. It has found to, increase recidivism of sex offenders and invite vigilante justice. Okay, so the way that the police respond to sexual assault victims is very important for whether they're going to, continue to report. So this interaction determines, how victims will deal with the rest of the criminal justice system. So a huge reason for not reporting crime, especially sexual victimization, is the mistrust of the police. So an example of this is the Gregory Bello case. So this is Gregory Bello, a woman reported being sexually assaulted by him. The police did not believe her and, dismissed it. So he was not arrested, and he ended up sexually assaulting a number of other women before the police finally believed these women and ended up arresting him. But if, the police would have believed her in the first place, it would have prevented all these additional women from being victimized. Okay, so false allegations do happen. They're not as common as someone, not being charged or convicted for a sexual assault, but they definitely do happen. About 5% of cases reported to the police are false, so it's found that they did not happen. So these usually have a baseless allegation. One doesn't have enough evidence to prove it occurred. Again, these cases rarely do lead to conviction, but it does occur, and there have been some cases that, I guess they wouldn't necessarily be offenders, but they were convicted, people were convicted, and it turns out that it never actually happened. So one of the more, well-known cases is the Duke lacrosse cases. A woman named Crystal Magnum accused these 3 Duke lacrosse players of rape so that she wouldn't go to jail after a fight that she got into. The DA really pushed this case along because he was hoping to get reelected. The accused were eventually cleared of any wrongdoing. Okay, so for medical legal response, most staff at hospitals are not trained to work with victims and collect evidence. So solution to this is a sexual assault nurse examiners. So hospitals that use these nurse examiners have better evidence. They're able to, collect evidence and preserve evidence a little bit better. Victims were more satisfied than those who had their rape kits done by people that were not sexual assault nurse examiners. Sexual assault response teams. These are multi-agency collaborations to improve treatment. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. Individuals from the prosecutor's office, law enforcement, advocacy groups, forensic examiners kind of all come together to help sexual assault victims. So prosecuting rape and sexual assault is very difficult, and not a lot of cases are actually tried. A lot of cases are dismissed. Prosecutors really prefer to pursue these sort of slam dunk cases where they know that they're going to get a conviction. If the evidence isn't all there, they're probably not going to want to try the case. And these slam dunk cases are very rare for rape and sexual assault. The victim characteristics play a large role in whether the case will be pursued or not. So those that have non-stranger sexual assaults will be less likely to be charged. So if the victim and offender know each other, and if the victim was a former intimate partner, or dating partner or close friend, they'll be less likely to try those cases. Also, if the victim was engaging in high-risk behavior such as drug and alcohol use or offending, they'll be less likely to try those cases as well. So for stranger sexual assaults, these are the ones that, the prosecutor is more likely to try, but the charging is based on legal factors. So juries, it's hard because they may be swayed by their own, beliefs in rape myths.